Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Land at Lunch webinar. We will be talking today about responsible natural capital and carbon management, and about the protocol that the Commission has published to support with that. I'm joined today by my colleagues Lisa Busby and Alex Curry. Lisa is our training coordinator and has put together our Land at Lunch programme. And will be helping out with some of the tech and the background. And Alex Curry has recently joined us as a good practice advisor, and he has experience in peatland restoration when he worked at Nature Scotch, so has some great practical experience of this topic. So for today's webinar, I should explain, I'll hand over to Lisa in a minute for some polls, and then I will be giving a presentation on the protocol, talking you through a case study that we've published, and then we will move on to a Q&A session, and Alex and I will be able to take your questions. So I'll hand over to Lisa just now to talk you through the polls and some of the information we're looking for.
Thanks, Gemma. Are you okay to stop sharing your screen for a second for me?
Yep.
Amazing. Thanks so much. Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Lisa. I'm going to run through some housekeeping and then we're going to do a super quick poll before we start. So you'll see that I popped the privacy policy and our notice about recording in the chat already. We are recording, including the chat and the Q&A, and information about how that recording is used, as I say, is in the chat now. So everyone's camera and mic are off today by default, but we welcome questions in the Q&A box and comments in the chat box. Both of these can be found in the control panel at the bottom of your screen. Questions and comments in the Q&A box are anonymous, if you prefer, but your screen name is always visible in the chat, so that's worth remembering. In today's session, we also have the option for you to turn on closed captions. This function is also enabled from the control panel at the bottom of the screen using your CC button. We would just flag that these captions are auto-generated, so there may be a few inaccuracies, but these are out of our control, I'm afraid. And yeah, we're going to be collating feedback throughout the session in the form of 2 super short Zoom polls, and we're really grateful. I just want to say that in advance. We're so appreciative for the feedback that you give us in these. These are anonymous. We don't share the answers to the entire group, and in a little minute I'm going to post how we use that data, so you've got information about that in the chat that will be coming. And lastly, I just want to flag that we're going to be talking about a lot of links today, a lot of resources, and I'm going to be in the background posting links to those in the chat as we go along. So if there's any that are of particular relevance, particular interest, you want to get on that right away, you can click through straight away from the chat. But don't worry, we collate all our resources and we collate the recording of this video and we put it on a sort of shared resource page, and I'll share the link to that resource page right at the end of the webinar. So hang on for that and make sure you get the link to that resource page today. Okay, so if you've got any questions about this housekeeping, go ahead and pop them into the chat. But I'm just going to start our first poll and let you get on with that. So here we go. Hopefully you can see that. Please give me a shout in the chat if you can't. And it's 4 super quick questions. You have to scroll through to answer those. And I can see people are doing it. Okay, amazing. I'm going to give you just a few minutes to complete that, and I'll pop that privacy policy that I said I would into the chat now. Okay, I think we're there with the poll. I'm going to end that now. And I'm going to hand back to Gemma to start our session today. See you in a little bit.
So, like Lisa said, welcome to our chat about the Responsible Natural Capital and Carbon Management Protocol. I've got a few slides to go through today. Some of them you may know a bit of the information already, some of you may be newer to it, so we'll try and make sure that we can cover enough content for everyone to really follow along with what's happening. So first of all, a very brief introduction to the Scottish Land Commission. It looks from the poll like a lot of you will have attended some of our events before, so you might be familiar with this, but really how land is owned and used and who benefits from those arrangements is really important to economic and community development being undertaken in a socially just way. So our vision at the Land Commission is for a fair, inclusive and productive system of ownership, management and use of land that delivers greater benefit for all the people of Scotland. So the question, we're a public body. We were established on the 1st of April 2017 as a result of the Land Reform Act 2016, and we are wholly funded by Scottish Government. And we're governed by 5 land commissioners and 1 tenant farming commissioner, and they are appointed by ministers. And at present, I think we have 18 or 19 staff. We further land reform by stimulating fresh thinking, supporting change in practice, and making recommendations to Scottish ministers where appropriate for legislative and policy change. So really our aim is to make sure that Scotland's land is owned and used in fair, responsible and productive ways. So that's a brief introduction to us, and I'll now talk about some of the key concepts and some of the definitions we use when talking about natural capital and carbon management, and these are really key to our protocol and the things we're talking about today. So when natural capital is defined by the Scottish Forum on Natural Capital as the stocks of natural assets, which include geology, soil, air, water, and all living things. So humans derive a wide range of benefits from natural capital, and they're often called ecosystem services, and these are things that make our life possible. Carbon management is a process by which people seek to sequester carbon or reduce carbon emissions through natural or artificial processes. So in this protocol, we are referring to natural processes to sequester carbon, such as through tree and hedgerow planting, or through salt marsh restoration, or prevent the emissions of carbon, such as peatland restoration and improving soil management. So investment in carbon management, it's important to note, should be something that's used not to offset emissions. It's not something that should be used as a replacement for other actions to avoid, reduce or mitigate emissions. It's something that should always be done in addition to action that's taken to reduce emissions at source as close to zero as possible. Community wealth, we refer to in the protocol, and community wealth refers to the wealth and benefits generated by jobs, services and income flows within a local economy that are retained by and directed back into that local economy. So a community wealth building approach places control and benefits of assets and resources into the hands of local people, and it supports democratic and collective ownership of assets and of the local economy, taking a whole place collaborative approach. And it's a really people-centred approach to local economic development, and there's some great opportunities to support that through natural capital and carbon management. And finally, just transition, which is a term you may have heard, and a just transition is reaching a nature-rich, net zero future and a climate-resilient economy in a way that delivers fairness and tackles inequality and injustice. So it's both the outcome, a fairer, greener future for all, and the process that must be undertaken in partnership with those who are impacted by the transition to net zero. So now to introduce you to our protocol. So the Scottish Government is committed to reducing greenhouse emissions to net zero by 2045. A range of measures have been set out in the Scottish Government's climate change plan, which was updated in December 2020, including reducing greenhouse gas emissions and increasing nature-based carbon sinks in Scotland. So the Scottish Government policy is to reach emissions reduction targets, which are required by legislation, solely through efforts that are made in Scotland and without relying on the purchase of international offsetting credits. So this is a target that it's recognised cannot be reached through public funding alone. Significant responsible private investment is needed to support public funding to reach Scotland's tree planting and peatland restoration targets, which will help to deliver the transition to net zero. So net zero targets have led to increasing investment in carbon and natural capital, and this investment is a really key driver of change in Scotland and comes with associated wider impacts for communities. So if you attended last week's webinar on natural capital and the land markets, you will have heard more about this. And if you didn't catch the last fortnight's Land at Lunch webinar, then you can catch the recording of that on YouTube. So the Land Rights and Responsibilities statement outlines the rights and responsibilities that come with owning land and property. And of course, responsible landowners, managers and investors can and do support a wide range of private and public benefits through their approach to investing in, owning and managing natural capital, whether that's through carbon sequestration, emission reductions, biodiversity gains or habitat restoration. However, as these markets develop, it's really important for those who own or control land to really understand their responsibilities and ensure that the way they own and use that land contributes to meeting Scotland's economic, social and environmental outcomes. So the protocol that we've developed is really intended to support that aim and to support the Scottish Government's interim principles for responsible investment in natural capital. And it should be the protocol should be read in conjunction with this and with other Scottish Government policy, including Scotland's National Strategy for Economic Transformation. So now I'm going to talk you through what we've set out in the protocol and why these things are important. So the protocol sets out reasonable expectations for landowners, managers and investors to responsibly manage carbon and natural capital. And we've set those out into 3 sections. So the first of these is community engagement and benefits. So the key points here are really that landowners and managers should engage communities in decisions relating to land that may impact on them in good time for communities to be able to influence the decisions being made. And this is something that's in line with our protocol on engaging communities in decisions relating to land, and it's something that we would expect to see not just across carbon management and natural capital, but across different kinds of land use. We recognise that it's important that land should be managed in ways that recognise the multiple benefits that land can bring and not just for a single purpose. So land management should seek to sustainably balance social, economic and environmental considerations over the long term. And that is something that's come through in the recently updated Land Rights and Responsibility Statement with the addition of a new principle that reflects this. Landowners and managers should also work with local communities to identify opportunities to share the benefits from the management of natural capital and carbon with them, and to support local priorities and aspirations. So we recommend that things like the establishment of a community benefit fund to provide direct financial returns to local communities be considered, but that other forms of benefits in line with a community wealth building approach also be considered. And in terms of community wealth building, it's not just the likes of financial benefits, but there are opportunities to work with communities and provide benefits through things like procurement, fair work and inclusive ownership models. The next section that we set out in the protocol is around ownership and tenure. So potential purchasers of land for natural capital and carbon purposes should really consider a range of governance options to meet their management objectives, and should consider whether exclusive ownership of land is actually necessary for these, or if there are ways they can work in collaboration or partnership with other landowners, tenants and local communities to deliver those social, environmental and economic outcomes that are sought. And where rights in carbon and natural capital are transferred to a third party, this is something that should be recorded openly and transparently. And obviously transparency is one of the key principles of the Land Rights and Responsibility Statement. When it comes to natural capital and carbon, there are options available for this. For example, use of the UK Land Carbon Registry would be recommended if that's appropriate in your situation. Landowners and managers should also consider the impact of carbon management projects on any tenants and engage relevant parties early in discussions about how to manage those risks and those benefits. And if a joint venture was proposed where landowners and tenants were looking to work together, then those involved should look at appropriate sharing of risks, responsibilities, costs and incomes. And if agreements are reached between tenants and landowners about activity, it's strongly recommended that those involved enter into suitable legal contracts to ensure that the agreements that have been made are respected. And our final section of expectations in the protocol is around the kind of environmental aspects. So net environmental and biodiversity gains should be sought through the management of natural capital and carbon. And of course, through this, existing natural capital should be protected and enhanced alongside the development of any new activities and carbon management projects that are being considered. It's also recommended that surveys are conducted to establish baselines and that monitoring systems are put in place to really establish any environmental or biodiversity gains that are being made through these projects. And a coherent approach is something that's really beneficial when delivering environmental benefits. And it should be considered what can be done beyond single land holdings, and whether it's possible to work with neighbouring landowners and others, looking at landscape scale and delivering a kind of integrated land use there. And finally, it's recommended that consideration is given to collaboration with other stakeholders to ensure a really consistent approach across larger scales. So I'm going to touch on a case study that we have published on our website. You'll be able to see it in more detail there. But this is about Africa Highlands, and the Africa Highlands project is about bringing together landowners from across the Central Highlands to support nature, people and businesses and create a more progressive and sustainable local economy. So the Africa Highlands project is led by Trees for Life, and they're bringing together landowners and communities, as I've said, to support the aims that we've got on the slide there. So the long-term vision for the area is to improve natural habitats, to support biodiversity, contribute to the growth and success of nature-based and sustainable businesses in the area, and to strengthen and grow local communities. So the project is still at a fairly early stage, and Trees for Life are working with local landowners in a really big area of the Highlands, stretching from Glenelg in the west across to Drumnadrochit in the east. And the aim is to build relationships and identify common interests across those areas. So a really diverse range of just over 20 landowners, public, private, NGO, large and small, have joined the initiative, and discussions are ongoing with others who may get involved. So those who sign up to the initiative are asked to identify commitments that they can make to build on existing achievements and to contribute to the vision that's been set out. And the landowners' ability to make their own decisions about how they use and manage their land to achieve this in practice is unaffected through this. But Africa Highlands really does recognise that the project must open up opportunities for people who don't own the land, and that local communities should benefit from the actions that are being taken across this range of projects. So the vision is for people to benefit as nature thrives, and that can be through nature-based employment, through learning, and there are partnerships in place with some local schools, through new commercial investment and activity, and through shared income, and that income is from, for example, the selling of carbon credits. So Africa Highlands understands the need for action to make sure that the natural environment flourishes alongside prosperous and healthy communities, and those involved are willing to put in the time and effort to ensure that this is done in a really fair and inclusive way. So like I said, there are links to that case study on our website, and you can find out a bit more through the Africa Highlands website. And just to finish off this portion of the presentation, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Good Practice programme and what we do at the Commission and how we can help with projects where natural capital and carbon management is an aspect of the project, or where people are facing some issues around it. So the Scottish Land Commission has a really key role to play in the development and realisation of the Land Rights and Responsibility Statement principles, and to help drive the culture change that's needed to make more of Scotland's land. So our Good Practice programme has really been designed to provide a visible and coordinated approach, and to encourage and enable those with an interest in land to recognise and fulfil the land rights and responsibilities in practical ways. So we work with all kinds of owners of land, including individuals, companies and trusts, public owners, NGOs, charities and community owners. And we also work with tenants and other groups where they have kind of a particular control or interest in land. So our work programme that we use to support these people is a programme of working with stakeholders across different sectors. So we have a Good Practice advisory group. Membership of that group includes representatives from Community Land Scotland, Development Trust Association for Scotland, National Farmers Union, Scottish Land and Estates, Scottish Property Federation and Scottish Environment Link. And so we work with them to develop things like protocols, guidance, and templates that can be used to help people understand the principles of the statement, and to understand what expectations are and what actions could be taken to support behaviour that's in line with that. We also have a programme of self-evaluation, which is where we work more closely with different organisations to explore how things work in their contexts and to explore the ways that they own, use and manage land, and to identify what they do really, really well that could be shared with other people, and to identify any kind of improvements in practice that could be made. We also provide training and development opportunities, and we'll work with organisations to develop training for their staff. We run webinars like this, and we're happy to look at kind of tailoring approaches to different organisations to help them with any aspect of land rights and responsibilities that is of particular interest to them. So in terms of natural capital, we also have some work ongoing. My colleague Charlie unfortunately couldn't be with us today, but she is our diversification project manager, and she's working directly with landowners looking at opportunities to diversify ownership and tenure, particularly when it comes to things like investment in natural capital. We also have work ongoing on community benefits, and so we are working with some contractors and understanding the different approaches that are taken and the lessons that can be drawn from those. So it's we are happy to speak to anyone in relation to natural capital and carbon, to tell you a bit more about what we're doing, to understand what you're doing and what lessons could be shared with other people. So I will stop sharing now, and I will bring in Alex, who has hopefully been keeping an eye on the Q&A box and the chat, and we'll take some questions. So if there's anything you'd like to ask, please use the Q&A box below, or just let us know what you're thinking around this, or anything you'd like to know a bit more about, anything you'd like me to expand on. So I will bring in Alex. Alex, have you got any questions there to kick us off?
Yes, I do, Gemma. So one of the questions I've had come in is, as a landowner, what type of stakeholders might I expect to find, approach, or be approached by in terms of attracting investment in natural capital? So generally speaking, the type of stakeholders you find are spread across the three sectors of our economy. So looking at the public sector, you could have organizations such as Nature Scot, SEPA, you could have Historic Environment Scotland, you could also have Scottish Forestry and Water. Those are some sort of main examples there. There are many more. You can also have potential stakeholders from non-governmental organizations as well, those including the likes of the RSPB. We've also got sort of organizations like the John Muir Trust, different publicly owned or community trusts as well. And it's also worth noting the distinction between the public sector and the sector of sort of community-owned bodies as well. Those are also very good ones to consider in terms of stakeholders. Keeping an eye out for any local potential small-scale businesses or charities that might be in the area as well is often highly beneficial. Collaborating and drawing in stakeholders from your sort of geographical area can have a lot of benefits in terms of both spreading the risks and the rewards of natural capital schemes. For any further questions, if unsure, or perhaps wanting to get a bit more information as to what type of stakeholders might be suitable for the types of projects you'd like to undertake, we very much sort of answer quite a lot of these questions through our contact email that you can find. And also, as a good practice advisor, these are some of the tasks that myself and others will be looking at in the longer term. And I'm just seeing a couple of questions popping up here. So another question about the arbitrary boundaries. That's actually quite an interesting one, because ecosystem services don't abide by proprietary boundaries. And it's actually really important to consider that, because quite often you might have one property that's potentially doing quite a lot of work in terms of it could be sort of restoring their peatlands, or reforesting or what have you, and then the adjacent property might in fact not be participating in the scheme or be adversely or positively affected by it. So in terms of how to accommodate that when we're looking at the context of carbon management and natural capital, there are often prospects for collaboration across schemes directly related to natural capital investment, but also other schemes such as the agri-environment scheme, for example, wherein if a particular property has declared an interest, there can be, for competitive schemes, there can actually be increased points, if you will, awarded to properties that are collaborating with neighboring areas as well in these type of schemes. For non-competitive schemes, something quite as simple as trying to engage with local property owners or putting in a joint interest to manage natural capital investment or carbon management can be extremely beneficial as well. In terms of specific publicly available resources, again, sort of consultation with individuals such as myself as a good practice advisor can often do a little bit of background research there, and it'll also quite naturally depend on what sort of ecosystems are being looked at. If it's something a bit more forestry related or a bit more general, sometimes a bit of background research can be undertaken to sort of get an idea of what types of natural capital, because there's actually quite a few different types, are involved and how these things relate with sort of areas as well.
Thanks, Alex. We've got a question in about income from selling carbon credits, and a question about whether we have any examples of other non-public or philanthropic financing streams to finance natural capital. So I'm going to pop a link in the chat for you, and this is for the Green Finance Institute Hive. So they've got some useful information there about mobilising private finance for nature. And as I mentioned, my colleague Charlie is also working with some organisations looking at how they work in relation to that, and we'll hopefully be able to publish some lessons on that next year. But if anyone who is in the session has any ideas further to that about how you can finance or any particular sources of finance for natural capital, either non-public or philanthropic, then please do feel free to share those in the chat. And further to that, we've got another question that's come in as well, and the question is, how can I, as a local resident next to a piece of land recently bought by a carbon credit company, ensure that they engage with our local community for the benefit of the community? So the land in question borders a village and sits between the village and a community-owned asset, and there's a long-standing need identified for a path between the village and the asset. So far they haven't engaged the development trust or anyone locally, and there's fear there that they might not add any local benefit in what they're doing. So that is a really, really good question. And I'll kick off here, and Alex might want to jump in. That it's if you know who the company is and you've made that approach to them, and you've made multiple approaches and you aren't getting anywhere, it is something you can bring to us at the Commission, and we can look at whether there's anything we can do to help you. But I think really, being open about that line of communication and making a specific request to the organisation to have a meeting with your community would be helpful, and in line with our protocol on engaging communities in decisions relating to land. We do set out that any requests that are reasonably made to meet with landowners to discuss their plans should be accommodated, ideally within 6 weeks, but obviously we take into account there might be other factors affecting timing in these situations. But that, reaching out with quite a specific request is a really good starting point, and like I say, we may be able to help if you're not getting anywhere there. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Alex?
No, that was a very complete answer there. Thank you for that. It was just a sort of slight provision there. Generally speaking, it is always encouraged to encourage sort of conversations and contact without necessarily intervening. It's a sort of facilitation, if you will, of local communities coming together to communicate. But as the Land Commission, we're always there to provide advice, to help guide conversations, and always encourage these first before getting more thoroughly involved in terms of approaching of our own accord organizations or trying to bring parties to the table. And that is, again, it's more just to, it's just within the spirit actually of keeping conversations within the community. So we're not seen as an outside body coming in necessarily, but also providing all the information and advice to let those discussions happen.
Yeah, it can be helpful as well, just to make them aware of our protocols. We've sometimes found that if communities share those and kind of let them know what their expectations are, then it can help facilitate some communication there. But that was a really good question, so thank you very much for asking that. And I'm sure we'll see other situations like that cropping up as we see increased activity in the market.
I've got another question
sure.
That's popped up here, and it's regarding what types of jobs or services can be identified as helping towards community wealth, and how might I include these in the planning when approaching natural capital as a landowner. So there are actually quite a few sort of different avenues. Naturally, job provision, which was covered actually previously in the presentation as well to a certain extent. So providing jobs for projects such as perhaps reforesting and creating sort of a sustainable timber fuel source for the local area. It can actually have quite an expanded remit for us. So even things like forest schools, for example, that there's been funding for that discussed in previous trusts. Services can also be directly linked to the benefit of keeping sort of streams and rivers clear. Obviously, like water being one of like a really essential local aspect of natural capital that can provide benefit as well. So it might not necessarily be something as tangible as a job per se for somebody in the local community, but also making sure that all the ecosystem services and that's the benefits that flow from the natural assets into the local community are preserved and maintained. There's also a few tenets that underpin community wealth that are quite relevant here to mention. I would say one of them being progressive procurement. A second one being fair employment, ensuring, for example, that any employment contracts that do go out to the local community are done in such a manner that are beneficial, are considerate, are a positive workspace, offer opportunities for local communities to get involved and learn and increase the skill base of the rural sector, which is something that falls into our sort of fair economy approach as well as the Commission. Shared ownership, that can be something that can be considered in terms of community wealth as well. So if there's a project that as a landowner you feel you could include community bodies in, that is often something that can, I mean, it can vastly increase just communication and participation with the local community, make sure the local community is on side, that they feel that they've got a say, that they are included. But it can also lessen the workload as a landowner as well. If you've got different charities and communities participating in projects, the responsibility itself is divided, and that can actually make the management of these projects easier as well. There's another tenet of Commonwealth, which is ensuring that financial power is directed towards local economies. And what that means basically is that profits and capital generated through investment in natural capital projects on your land as a landowner, using this as an attempt to direct some of those funds into the local community again, be it improving access and paths, perhaps a car park, also investing in local businesses and local community efforts. Again, that's a really important way of roping the community into activities that you're doing as a landowner interested in community wealth. And the socially just use of land and property is the fifth tenet of community wealth. And again, that's making sure that quite often, and this is quite a nuanced point, but ecosystem services, it's not quite black and white, because sometimes some services might actually have a negative trade-off with other services in the area. So for example, if your land is surrounded by, for example, actively agricultural areas, some of the things that you might undertake, for example, damming, peatland, or forestry as well, if there's other functions in the area, such as particular sites, landscape functions, tourism functions, it's worth keeping those in mind when undertaking any type of natural capital investments. Because just because something might be good for one particular party, be it the human side of things or the environment side of things, it might not necessarily be good for the other. So taking in a kind of holistic approach to what you'd like to projects you'd like to undertake is also a very important part of the community wealth side of things.
That's great. Thank you, Alex. I have popped a link in the chat to guidance we've developed at the Commission on community wealth building and land, which focuses specifically on the land and property pillar, and the link to land rights and responsibilities. So that might be of interest and is relevant to what Alex has been speaking about there. So that is us for questions at the moment. If there's anything that occurs to you later, or anything that you think of that you'd like to raise with us, then do please let us know. But I'm going to bring Lisa back in now.
Thanks, Gemma, and thanks everyone for a really rich discussion. Brilliant questions coming in, and well answered by our team. Good range of questions coming in. So I'm going to do now the final poll for today. So if I launch this, hopefully you can see it, and people can let me know if they can in the chat. And I'm going to give you a few minutes to answer that for us. As I say, this is more of an evaluative poll. It gives you a chance to feedback on what's been covered in the webinar today and give us a sense of what was helpful, what could be done differently in the future. On that note, we now have live on our events page on our website the next 6 sessions of Land at Lunch, our autumn winter training programme. They're all live, they're all ready to sign up for, and in a moment Gemma's going to share her screen and talk a little bit about the various topics that we're going to cover. In the meantime, I just wanted to flag up that we do have a mailing list, so just to avoid missing out on anything, we have a newsletter that goes out, and you can receive that by joining our mailing list. And I'm going to be quiet now and let you complete the poll, and I'll pop the link to sign up to that mailing list in the chat so you have it. I'll also pop the link to all the resources that were shared today, so you have one place to access all of those too.
Okay, so here is the programme for Land at Lunch 2023. So we'll be kicking off on the 18th of January, and that session also is on how you can get involved in local land decisions. So we have a programme that's running through to the end of March. So we will be covering common good, land assembly in the public sector, rural housing, and a couple of sessions at the end on how to tackle vacant derelict land and what practical tools are available for this. And so I'll just bring up the poster. So this is our first session in the new year on the 18th of January, and you can join my colleague Karen Grant to hear more about how you can get involved in local land decisions. And we'll be following the same format. It will be a midday Wednesday webinar, and the sessions will take place every 2 weeks through to the end of March. I think that's us for today, folks. So thank you very much for joining us, for your feedback and participation in the polls, and we hope to see you again in the new year. Cheers.